Good afternoon and welcome to the Pasco Public Facilities District Board Special Meeting. Today is Tuesday, October the 22nd, 2019, and it is 2:33. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First order of business then is if Deborah Barnham, the city clerk, would please take roll. So before you start though, we aren't going to do any introductions. Instead, as the names are called, kind of please take note of the names and who says here, so you can match up the names and the faces. So go ahead, Deborah.
Miss Gillespie? Here. Mr. Morissette?
Present.
Mr. Jellick?
Present.
Mr. Dietrich?
Yes.
And Miss Bowdish?
Here.
Thank you. So obviously we have a quorum. Item number 2 on our agenda is recognition of visitors and public comments. Is there anybody that would like to address the board at this time, or if not, we'll go on to item number 3, which is the approval of our September 17th, 2019 board meeting minutes.
I move approval. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that the September 17th, 2019 board meeting minutes be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody opposed. So the next item is the claims approval for the third quarter 2019, which totals $164,962.44. And for the board members, if you take a look at the payment register, and on the bottom half of the page, it shows the total expense of the $164,962. And then reading up above, you can see what we're being asked to approve. The flow-through dollars to the Kenwood Public Facilities District, insurance premiums, and the administrative services. Are there any questions? So we have to approve this. So somebody has to. You already did?
Yeah, I moved it.
Okay, and then we need a second.
I'll second.
Maybe later it'd be good if you sit on my left side here. So. I'm a product of the 60s. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the $164,962 of claims that they're approved for payment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So the payment motion carries. Item number 5, our financial report. So first, if you would take a look at the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, and what we're going to focus on is going to be the current period activity. So the Public Facilities District's accounting year runs from January the 1st through December 31st. So what the board is looking at is the third quarter activity. And as far as the current period total revenues, $161,713, of which you can see that 95% of that, or $156,000 approximately, is from sales tax collection revenues. We do receive a grant from the city of Pasco that helps us to pay for administrative services and advertising, legal, professional services, insurance, and administrative services. It goes towards those bills that we do incur. So again, the total revenues for the third quarter was $161,713. Total expenditures amounted to that $164,962, which was the claims that we approved in our item number 4, just previous to this item. And of course, 95% of our expenses are the flow through of the money going back out to the Kenwood Public Facilities District. We also had legal services that totaled $4,620. And some board insurance of $801, and then every month the Public Facilities District pays back to the city of Pasco for administrative services $1,000 a month, so that's $3,000 total. So there is our financial report. We ended up with a slight decrease in fund balance for the third quarter of $3,250. So that is not an item that requires approval by the board. Rather, it's an information item. So having said that, unless there's any questions or nothing regarding the financial report, item number 5, reports from committees, the Kenwood Convention Center Advisory Board. And Caroline, you and I attend that, and there were no meetings that I'm aware of, so we didn't miss anything. Good. So that helps to get through the agenda. Item number 7. We have, as part of the Public Facilities District meetings, that we have had the city attorney, Eric Ferguson, who also helps us, the Public Facilities District, with our legal advice and our legal matters. And so Eric and his firm have been providing a series of legal considerations that the board should be aware of. And so this is the part 3 of a series. Eric, if you could, just a very brief description of the 1 and the 2. And that way, this one is going to be, Eric is going to discuss with this RCW 35.57.
Great.
Eric,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, just real briefly, this is part of our legal refresher series of just little talks as we're going along here. The first one obviously dealt with the requirements related to Public Disclosure Commission and when something goes on the ballot. We kind of started with things that seemed to be pretty relevant, and kind of backed our way out before we started getting to the really dry stuff, so we could try to hook you with the fun stuff first. But now we're down to to talking about some of the statutes. The second thing we talked about related to the concepts of this particular board and how it was formed and how it's governed, related to both the board's charter as well as the bylaws. The big takeaways there were that the charter can only be amended by council. This board obviously can amend its own bylaws. Now we're kind of down to RCW 3557, and I will not try to drag you through that entire statute. I will just try to focus specifically on 3557.020. That's kind of the hot button, or the kind of the focus of this particular board, in the sense that we've had a recent change, obviously, where previously city-created boards under 3557.010 were limited to just regional centers as well as special events. This most recent legislative session, we had the legislature approve Senate Bill 1499, which allowed city-created PFDs who had also participated in creating a regional PFD, which is clearly this board, would then subsequently be allowed to own, operate, facilitate a recreational facility. That kind of brought up more questions than answers last time around, because it seemed to be something that people really wanted to define, recreational facility. I reported to you last time that I did not know exactly what recreational facility meant, and I've worked on it for over a month, and had some people who are a lot smarter than me work on it, and I can report that I still don't know exactly what that means. So it's unfortunate that it's not clearly defined. We do have some pretty good ideas about what we think that would mean. One of the things we also did was go back during our research. We went back and looked at some of the legislative reports, hoping that those would kind of point us in a direction of what exactly a recreational facility meant. I think the best way to describe what we think a recreational facility would encompass, starting with some of the things that we know it does not encompass, is because it specifically excludes ski areas. So we can safely mark that off our list. We weren't going to do that. Then kind of going from there, I think the best way to approach this is there any place else in the code, even though it's not defined in this particular statute, is there any place else in the code that actually defines recreational facilities? Fortunately, there is. In the next chapter, after 3557, under 3609, it talks about the creation of recreational and park boards, and they actually do define recreational facilities for us. And it's a pretty broad definition. I think the big key takeaways, and I won't go through and recite the whole all the litany of things that it could potentially include, but I think the key takeaways are that it really does need to do two things. It needs to be really focused on two major themes with regard to the definition. It really needs to stay focused on being open to the public, and that doesn't mean that every member of the public would particularly use it. It lists racetracks and drag racetracks and other things. Things I may be interested. My wife might not be so interested in those things, but she's welcome to go. But so it has to just be open to the public, and there's a lot of things that it could include. The other thing is that it has to be really focused on leisure time activities. That's been defined in the code as well. So I think with those two things in mind, I think that'll give us a pretty good idea about what recreational facility would include. And I think it's pretty broad to finally answer your question, which is what does it include? A lot of things. So it just really needs to be open to the public. It needs to really be focused on leisure time activities. And then we can kind of go from there and really see other things that would fit into that. But yeah, that's a brief answer on the question from last time, which was really what does the addition of recreational facilities for city-created public facilities district include?
Just to kind of summarize a little bit there, Eric, and maybe say it back to you this way. So this 35.57, it sounds like it's much easier to describe what it does not include as opposed to what it does include.
Unfortunately, sometimes with the law, that's correct. It actually probably would be a little easier to define what it's not versus what it is. But we do have some pretty good ideas in the definition from the Parks Board definition of things that it could include. But it ends with a big or other recreational activities. So that's a pretty broad distinction there at the end.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members have any questions for Eric? If not, try to work through the first 7 items on the agenda in order to have as much time as possible for item number 8. I sure trust that the folks that showed up here this afternoon, that you didn't come here to listen to me give the financial report, which meant we want to have these two gentlemen, Ken Ballard and Keith Hayes. Ken is going to speak first, and then Keith Hayes is going to do, from what I understand, a fair amount of speaking also. And Keith Hayes is an architect with Barker, Ranker, CCAT. Hope I say that correct. Close. Okay, thank you. And Ken is with Ballard King and Associates, and they are out of Highlands Ranch, Colorado.
Well, both Denver area, both of us are out of the Denver area.
So maybe it'd be good to start out just telling us a little bit about Ballard King, and you've been here before.
Yes.
So it's important to mention that also. So maybe a little bit about Ballard King, a little bit about before, and then the board now, we do not have any handouts or anything. So as far as the presentation, board members will just pay attention to the screen over here.
Right.
So then I forgot something. Zach Ratkai is our administrative person who is the liaison between us and the city of Pasco. And at this point, we probably better just take a second here, a minute
Sure.
maybe, for Zach to step in here. So it's very important to understand that there's 2 presentations with which Zach will explain, and also to explain exactly what the interaction is between the consultants and the board and the visitors and us and the consultants. So Zach, if you would go ahead and explain the ground rules, we'll all listen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Public Facilities District. With this portion of the meeting, your contracted consultant team, Ballard King and Associates, of whom you've introduced, will be conducting a workshop with the Public Facilities District. Is that a little bit better?
Way better.
Okay. With this portion of the meeting, your contracted consultant team, Ballard King and Associates, will be conducting a workshop with the Public Facilities District in order to discuss sort of the historical concept work that has been done in previous years for the vision of this project. as well as how to refresh the vision for 2019 and update some of the estimates of the items that you guys wish to explore with a potential aquatic center. The team today will be presenting and leading the board through a discussion this afternoon during this meeting, which we call the workshop portion of the meeting. As you can see, this meeting is public and it was advertised as such. But typically in the workshop setting, we do not have a public comment portion of this. So this is really a lens through which the public can watch the interaction between the PFD board and the consultant team as you outline a vision. Additionally, as advertised this evening, we will be having a public comment, public forum, public open house, for lack of a better term. Trying to zero in on that term there. This will be from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Pasco Police Department Community Room, which is at 215 West Sylvester Street, or just down the parking lot from City Hall. That will be the time where our consultant team will be in place to do a presentation, lead a little bit of a discussion. Everyone's invited in over there, and that's where the public open house and public comment portion of the submitting thoughts on the Aquatics Center will occur during the public open house portion of that meeting. In addition to that, for those from the community that are concerned about the Aquatics Center or have ideas or thoughts to share with the group, the city will be fielding public comment for the PFD through the city website, and we will have a portal set up. That's www.pasco-wa.gov, and we'll be able to submit comments electronically as well to pass on to the PFD as we go through this effort. And so with that, just wanted to outline some of the logistical items with the workshop this evening, or this afternoon, and going into this evening with the public open house. I'll send it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, for conduction of the workshop.
Okay, thank you. One more introduction is in order, and Pasco City Councilman Craig Maloney is here with us also this afternoon. And Craig represents our liaison between us and the City Council. And there were 2 City Council members that volunteered for this effort, so yourself and Mr. Maloney. So thank you for being here. All right, Ken, we're getting back. So now, please go ahead.
Oh, well, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here once again on this topic. Kind of starting out a little bit about who we are. Ballard King and Associates has been around for 28 years, and we're, as our name implies, we're a recreation planning firm, and we deal with recreation projects of varying types around the country. We work literally in all 50 states. One of our primary areas of business is the Pacific Northwest, and we have a number of projects going on in the Seattle area, Portland area, and of course here in Pasco as well. So this is what we do. We help communities develop recreation facilities of some sort. Certainly aquatics is a major area of focus for our firm, as it is for our project team. So we've actually been involved as a firm probably for over 10 years in this project in some way, shape, or form, looking at trying to develop an aquatic facility. It first started out as kind of a project that was going to be funded by the regional PFD, and that didn't move forward. So then it was kind of resurrected as more of a Pasco public facilities project. And so we did an initial study in 2016, and then here we're back again now after we waited for some changes in state law to allow this to occur as a function for the PFD. So that's now been taken care of, so we're back again to kind of revisit this project. And I think one of the key aspects as we start to move forward is the fact that this really is an update to the 2016 study. We're not kind of starting from ground zero, and the last time in 2016 we did kind of start from the very beginning, but we're really just working on an update to the 2016 study. So that's an important thing. So we're going to show you tonight kind of what was in that 2016 study, and then have some questions in terms of what we believe needs to be changed in that regard. So over the next about half hour, we'll go through kind of not only what we've learned, what we did back in 2016, but what's kind of changed since then, and what the questions are in terms of where we want to go with the project moving forward. So Again, the other third member of our team that's not here tonight that will be here as we proceed through this process. And by the way, this project team, as you see it here on the screen, is the one that's been involved over the years on this project. Ballard King and Associates, again, we're really the planning side of things. Barker, Rinker, Seacat, Keith Hayes, who will be up in a little bit to talk about the project in a little more depth. They're the architectural firm. Water Technology is the aquatic consultant and has been on the project as well. Again, they're not here this evening, but you will see them later on in the process. We're a team, the three of us, that have worked together on literally hundreds of these types of projects around the country. So we're not just here for this one project, but we have a long history of working together on these types of projects. And we know how to interact with each other and how to bring, obviously, the best options forward for you all to consider. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of reviewing where we were, and this is kind of the agenda of the things we're going to touch on during this process. A little bit of background information on the market analysis, what we call the program components, or the amenities that potentially could be included in the facility. Look at some different options in terms of what that may mean, going back to reviewing a little bit about what was done previously. How we refined that program with your help back in 2016 to kind of get it the preferred option. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what this means from a cost perspective, both capital and operations. So that's kind of our focus here for this evening. The tasks in our update process that we're going to be working on through this update to the study is really looking at what we call, again, the building program update, the components that would be included in the facility, based off what we'll be showing you here shortly, is the 2016 program for the facility, the preferred program that we talk about. Site analysis, which is certainly a big deal. It was a big deal in 2016 in terms of potentially where a facility of this nature will be located. That's part of our task to be done during this study. Concept plan update. We had some original kind of basic concepts, depending upon what changes with the facility, how that may interact with a potential site. Capital cost update, and again, trying to bring that up to date in terms of what it would cost to build the facility, and the operational update as well. And obviously this will be tied to any changes in the facility that may occur through this process. But it's really trying to take the study that we did in 2016, bring it up into 2019, and position this so ultimately the board can decide how they want to proceed with the project with updated and current information. So those are our project tasks. That's part of our scope of work for this project. So let's talk about kind of what we had in 2016. You'll notice that in our scope is not really an update to the market, and that's because when we did this 3 years ago, we did some projections out 5+ years on some of our data. So we're within that time frame now. So it didn't really seem that we needed to spend the time and effort as well as the money to do this aspect. So we had kind of identified early on 2 particular areas that would be served by the facility. One was the primary market, which was really Pasco and some of the unincorporated areas immediately adjoining to Pasco. And then also the secondary service area, which really included, for all intents and purposes, the Tri-City area. We identified that projected by 2020, there would be about 80,000 people in Pasco and the immediate areas around there. That put the secondary market at about 260,000+. So obviously a large secondary market as well. We looked a lot at the different characteristics within the marketplace in terms of numbers of households, ethnic makeup, median household income levels, and median age, those types of things that all tell us a lot about rates of participation in aquatics and other types of activities. We looked at also participation rates back in 2016. We tied that to the primary service area. We identified that about 16.6% of the population were regular swimmers of some sort. We converted that into numbers of people based on the 2010 population projecting out through 2020. Some of the market opportunities that we identified through this analysis, which not only looked at the demographics, but also the presence of other providers, in the marketplace, whether they were other public facilities. And again, this is looking throughout the Tri-Cities area, nonprofits and the for-profit sector as well. Some of the key things we got out of this, and I won't read all of them, but the biggest one is there's no indoor public pools in the greater Tri-Cities market. And again, we look at a population base that's over 260-some thousand. That's really unusual to have that large of a population base without an indoor aquatic venue. Certainly, that means that there's certainly a shortfall as it relates to that particular aspect. We looked at some of the needs within Pasco as it related to the fact that you don't have a comprehensive recreation center. We also recognize the role that the private health clubs and the private fitness centers play in providing services, not only as it relates to fitness amenities, but also the importance they are the primary provider of indoor aquatic and even outdoor aquatic venues for the population base in the Tri-Cities area. We recognize that certainly Pasco has an outdoor pool, as does all the other communities as well, but they are outdoor and they're seasonal. Certainly the focus on Pasco's Memorial Pool is on more competitive aquatics with a big 50-meter pool, but not a lot of outdoor, more what we call leisure or recreational pursuits really in place. We talk a little more about the fact that you have great weather for outdoor aquatics. There's certainly a market potential with just your population base for expanded aquatic opportunities. We also looked at the market constraints that were in place as well, and we certainly understand that the fees being paid at existing facilities for recreational swimming are not real high, and all that means is it makes it a little more difficult to generate significant revenues to help offset operations. Most of the competitive swim teams are paying reasonably low fees for use of pools as well, so that makes it a little more difficult. You do have some existing, obviously, private providers in terms of fitness providers within Pasco itself. We recognize that, LiveQuest being the largest and probably the most prominent one. We talked about at that point about a site that we were looking at, kind of the north and west end of Pasco at that particular time, and some concerns about that we've kind of, we'll talk about later, reopened kind of the site analysis piece, so that's no longer really valid in terms of a constraint at this particular point. We recognize that there's operational considerations in addition to the capital aspect of building and operating a facility, and that's certainly one, for most any community, the biggest hurdle to overcome. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and again, he's going to talk more about possible options and kind of where we were back in 2016 and what this may mean for moving forward. Keith, you may want to talk a little bit about Barker Rinker Seacat as well.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Keith Hayes. I'm a partner at Barker Rinker Seacat Architecture. We're based in Denver and work on indoor aquatics and recreation centers nationwide. Is that better?
Much better.
Sorry.
And just stay there.
Okay. Take some practice. My partner Chuck Musgrave worked with Ken back in 2016. I'm a University of Washington grad, so familiar with the area, and we have built work in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. There's several projects in the Seattle area, Salem, Oregon, and a project under construction in Bend, Oregon right now, as well as studies in all those areas as well. One of the processes that we use to work with a client is we try and educate our communities on the potential amenities in order to get everybody to a common place of understanding what the look and feel of these various, what we call program components are. So an example here is what an outdoor leisure pool or a spray ground looks like, what the features look like. And we also pay close attention to what it costs to operate the facility. That's the expense in the thermometer that you see in the lower right corner or lower left corner, as well as the potential revenue you could achieve for that. Trying to juxtapose, you might have some amenities that cost a lot and they don't generate a lot of revenue, or you might have some that don't cost much but they generate a ton of revenue. And we try and get those features balanced in your overall building program in order to optimize the operations of the facility. So let me belabor some of these items that we talked about. We have a whole slew of these. There's probably 200 different program components that we work with our clients. And at the end of the project in 2016, these were the ones that the board had settled on as the ones under consideration for the various program options, which we'll go over in a moment. So we started out with an outdoor leisure pool and spray ground. In the community outreach, there was a great deal of interest in this feature. It's an outdoor pool, generally warmer water. It's probably seasonal, Memorial Day to Labor Day, featuring a zero depth area, spray features, water slides. In this case, we'll show a plan image, but probably a zero depth area and a wave pool. Very high revenue potential, but also moderately high expense to operate. Also, there was desire for an indoor leisure pool. Similar features inside a building, warmer water, probably 6 to 8 degrees warmer than would be optimal if you were a really dedicated competitive swimmer, but suitable for exercise swim. Family area, water slide, lazy river, an emphasis on flexibility in these water spaces for people of all ages and abilities. It's an expensive facility to run, and so we want to optimize it so that if people are recovering from a medical condition, they can use it for therapy. As I get older, I know I enjoy some warm water now and again on my shoulders, walking around, opportunity for exercise, walking against the current channel, as well as being something fun for kids and a great introduction for swimming for folks with young children. Very expensive to operate, but also very high revenue spaces. Great amenity associated with these, I know my family took advantage of, was juxtaposing a flexible wet classroom associated with the indoor water piece. That can be used for training as well as indoor birthday parties. We're finding these very popular. A great example of something that's a very high revenue component, but not terribly expensive to operate. Concessions are a great amenity for outdoor features. We want it proximate to the lobby with a variety of seating, and that allows people to stay and use the outdoor water feature for a longer period of time. Very high revenue potential, moderate expense. Locker rooms are a key space for your patrons that are coming. They need to change into their bathing clothes to swim. We want wide open, safe, open, clean spaces with showers and toilet facilities. Natural light where it's appropriate, and community or cabanas, family cabanas, or changing rooms. So if you're coming, for example, I could come with my daughter and we could change as a family in one space. Or if you're recovering from an injury and your caregiver is of the opposite sex, that you can be accommodated and change your clothes without compromising other people's privacy. A major revenue component to a lot of indoor community centers is a weight room and cardiovascular equipment area. This is where we'd have cardio training equipment, circuit resistance equipment, free weights, and stretching. Very high revenue, very moderate expense. And as we understand, as the state legislation has been revised, one thing that's changed from 2016 to now is this is possibly a program component that would be excluded from the program that we'd consider. But we'll talk about that more in a bit. Exercise classroom space can accommodate youth programs, adult programs, group exercise. These could be for aerobics classes, jazzercise, yoga, martial arts, all those sorts of events in these sorts of spaces. Again, very high revenue, modest expense. Space that we consider somewhat of a loss leader, but a necessity for community recreation aquatic centers is a child watch and babysitting space. As families become more dispersed across the United States, you're less likely to maybe have a family group to take care of, or other relatives to take care of your children when you need to exercise. Same is true as the demographics change and we find older adults and grandparents taking care of grandchildren. And so as those older adults want to exercise, this provides an opportunity for short-term child care in the building for an hour, perhaps two, that allows those adults to exercise or participate in other activities and have their children in a safe environment. We enjoy having fun with these spaces, scaling into the children and making them visually vibrant for that age group. This is a flip of some of the other spaces you've seen where it's a very high expense but a relatively low revenue. Gymnasium is a backbone of most community centers traditionally. This is a space that hasn't necessarily changed over time, the 40 or 50 years, or even 100. However, I will submit that the activities inside the space have changed. And being in the Northwest, this is the heart of pickleball. That is a sport that has overtaken the nation like no other. We did not hear about that in Georgia even 2 to 5 years ago, and now people cannot stop talking about it. Gymnasiums, very flexible spaces, adopted to a variety of sports, basketball, volleyball, pickleball, badminton, to name a few, but they can also be used for larger exercise classes, child care. If you have large group events, all these things can occur in these spaces. High revenue space, relatively low expense to operate. And I think in Pasco, indoor walking and jogging, I'm going to guess, is important because people want a place to walk in the winter when it gets to be dark earlier here. That's what we've found in many of our Northwest communities. Probably 10 to 12 laps to the mile. We find it's actually a great amenity for a variety of ages. We'll find moms on the track, perhaps with strollers, early morning trying to get their walk in. We found this a great opportunity to partner with healthcare programs where you start to have silver sneakers and older adults exercising in these spaces as well. So it's great for a nice, dry, safe indoor walking venue. It's difficult to assess the revenue and expenses. It's lower revenue, but also low expense because people aren't generally going to pay just to walk around the track, but they'll certainly use this in conjunction with other amenities. We also heard a desire for a community room on the smaller side, an opportunity for a meeting such as this one, corporate meetings, community meetings, weddings, parties, celebrations of all sorts, and banquets. Probably not with a full prep kitchen. What we're showing in the lower right corner is what we call a catering kitchen or a warming kitchen. So this would be something where the food is prepared off-site and then heated and served from this space. And then the dishes are cleaned and stored. Moderate expense, a low revenue space, but we find that these are very popular in communities. I remember Federal Way saying that they didn't have, Federal Way Washington wanted a community room because they didn't have a room big enough in their community to celebrate their own birthday. I thought that was an interesting comment. One discussion for a future component, and you'll see this on the plan, was an indoor competition and lap swimming pool. This is what you're probably familiar with when you think of a swimming pool. It's a square pool, 25 yards long, 8 lanes across. Water temperature probably in the low 80-degree range as opposed to the high 80-degree range for the indoor leisure water. More expensive to operate. It's a lot of water that we're processing all the time. And lower revenue because we have fewer swimmers in each of the lanes at any given time. So we worked with the PFD and staff to establish a series of options, 4 to be precise. And actually, Ken, do you want to talk about the revenue and expenses?
One of the issues back in 2016 was obviously an interest by the board of bringing forward a facility that was going to be operationally sustainable. And one of the tasks we were really looking at was, so what are the elements that are the kind of the top 5 producers of revenue? And so just briefly, they're all pretty much, the top ones are all kind of exercise and fitness related. So it's weight cardio space, it's group exercise space. The party room, believe it or not, is also a major generator that only works obviously if it's done in conjunction with a recreational pool. The outdoor leisure pool, partly because it doesn't have the high operating expense, and gymnasium space, if it's properly utilized and programmed, can also be a high revenue producer. So those are kind of the top 5. They can vary a little bit, but pretty much the fitness aspect is always in the top 2. On the lower end, in terms of ones that have kind of the poorest revenue generation and basic cost recovery, and that's kind of balancing, again, not only your revenue, but with your costs, or an indoor competitive pool. Certainly a strong demand for that. They're not particularly cost effective from a revenue standpoint versus expense. Child watch spaces we talked about is as Keith kind of mentioned, it's a lost leader, but it's one of the things that's pretty critical if you have a strong fitness aspect to getting a broad base of users into the facility. Senior space, once again, important group to serve, but generally is not associated with high revenue production. Same thing with teens. Again, those are often two areas that community recreation facilities are focusing on, and rightfully so. And cultural arts space, again, generally not a high revenue producer as well. So those were kind of, just to reiterate, what was in the report back in 2016 in terms of what the high revenue producers were and the lower revenue producers. Besides just talking about, the aspect of the revenue production, as I mentioned, it's also balancing the costs and revenues together. So, here's kind of a listing of spaces, and this was in the report as well in terms of what the expense, and here we're talking about not expense to build, but expense to operate, and combining that with the revenue. So obviously, there's different combinations, but in most all facilities, you have a grouping that's, some in the high revenue, low operating cost segment, and some that are the opposite way. You have a balance in there, but if you have too many that have low revenue and high expense, makes it tough to, in a sense, have a facility that's able to be operated effectively in a community. So we wanted to make sure we were balancing those as we were making the decisions on the amenities that would be included in the facility.
The four options that we studied, the first option was option A. It was an aquatics only program. So the spaces were facility administration spaces and the required building spaces like locker rooms, equipment rooms, janitorial spaces, a concession area, the aquatic support, which is the lifeguard and first aid spaces, and then designed to accommodate a future indoor 8-lane, 25-yard lap pool. But the first phase would include a 4,000 square foot indoor leisure pool, and that's 4,000 square foot of water area, to be clear. Wet classroom and a party room, and then the outdoor aquatics, which was, I want to say, 13,000 square feet of water area. And this was a 23,000 square foot indoor facility. And I don't want you to look at the costs or pay attention to those because they were in 2016 dollars. Option B added community space and fitness to the mix. So this had the required spaces, facility administration, and building support in red above. The concessions, we added child watch and babysitting, a 60-person classroom or meeting room that would be subdividable into 2 rooms, 3,000 square foot weight and fitness area, an indoor multi-purpose aerobics studio, the 4,000 square foot indoor leisure pool, and the wet classroom. And this was about a 30,000 square foot program. Option C contrasted with the gymnasium and indoor track. So this had the support spaces, concession, a single middle school court gymnasium, that's 42 by 74 feet, an elevated walk jog track, about 12 laps per mile around the upper portion of the gymnasium, the aquatic support, the leisure pool, and the wet classroom, and then the outdoor aquatics. And this is about 36,000 square feet. The program that the group selected upon at the time was option D, which was a combination of those other 3 programs. It had the facility administration and building support spaces, concessions, the child watch babysitting, the community meeting room that was subdividable into 2 spaces, the gymnasium, the elevated jog walk track, the weight and fitness, and then the 4,000 square foot indoor pool, the wet classroom, and the outdoor aquatics. This was about 36,000 square feet. Sorry. We studied this on a generic site, and the plan you can see here. I don't know if I can you see? Can you see the mouse as I point at spaces? I'll look at the plan on the right, but the idea was that it was on an intersection, probably a corner lot with parking, with a drop-off near the front door. You would enter into a lobby space next to the administrative area. There'd be a community meeting room in front of the control point, so that would not necessarily be a pay to use, or you would reserve that and pay in advance as opposed to pay a daily or annual admission to use it. I lost my mouse. Next to the child watch space, off the lobby would be a locker room, which would be proximate to the indoor, the future 8-lane lap pool here, or the indoor warm water leisure pool here, and then across from the gymnasium there. There's a concession area outside, splitting between the large outdoor aquatics area and the indoor leisure pool, and then party rooms proximate to all three pool pieces. Upstairs would be the fitness area, an outdoor deck, probably an indoor classroom here, and then the track around the gymnasium. This is a slide just prepared by Water Technology illustrating the pools. So the lap pool, the leisure pool with some indoor lap swimming and deeper water for exercise programs, some play areas here, a indoor lazy river, a spa, and then outside a larger wave pool with a zero depth entry beach facility here, the wave area down below, and then a lazy river in this area with a variety of social spaces, and then a pair of water slides here that would have a run out space in this area. So we compared the 2016 program area and budget, and we've tried to update it to 2019 dollars. The 2016 program was, you'll recall, 36,000 square feet. In 2016, we estimated the cost to be about $18 million, and that was inflated to actually September of 2019. And the total, that was the building construction cost. That would be what you would pay a general contractor to build the building. The total project cost, which included soft costs like professional services, testing, reimbursable expenses, as well as site improvement costs on and off site, was about $26 million. So we like to focus on the total project cost because that's the cost that the community would pay for the entire project. In 2019, we understand we're not to include the fitness area, so we've excluded that. The building area is now just over 30,000 square feet, but inflating to a 2021 construction cost midpoint. We believe the building cost would inflate to about $20 million, and the project cost would inflate to about almost $32 million. And that accounts for state sales tax. I think the weak point in it is site costs. We need to really test those as part of our update, as well as the soft cost and the building construction cost. With that, we'll open the floor for questions.
Just a minute.
So we've kind of, just real quickly, gone through kind of where we were and a little bit of an update on what this potentially means right now. I think the focus for this afternoon is certainly to answer any questions that the board may have, but also to get some sense of kind of the amenities that we showed you, what we had in mind for 2016. Does that need to change? Are there alterations to that? I think obviously we're trying to say we want to be moving forward something that's right for the community, and we're trying to go back and validate what we did in 2016 is either correct or we need to make some changes to that. So that's where we're looking for some help from you all.
Okay, thank you. So don't sit down too long.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to talk amongst ourselves just for a moment here, that at a previous board meeting that your option A that you had up on the screen there was going to become our focus, and the community center was going to become a city project. Can people help me with that memory?
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat your question, please?
Oh my. So my question was, and I don't remember the exact date, and Mr. Zabel was here, that we needed some clarification in terms of what the Public Facilities District was going to be working on, and what would fit into the budget that we would be able, the city of Pasco, the sales tax collections would generate in terms of the sales tax revenue for the capital construction. And so my recollection from that meeting, and everybody, you gotta help me with my memory here, is that we were not going to do the option D, which included the community center, but rather the public facilities district was going to focus on the option A. Okay, so, and everybody agrees we're all back on that
Yes.
same page? Okay. So then if you were to bring up the slide where you had the line drawn through the, I think it was the weight fitness.
Yeah.
If you can move back just a little bit, that, okay, yeah. The 3,600 square foot weight fitness area. So there's two other items on that 2019 program area and budget column, which are the 60-person community meeting room, which is where, my understanding where we left off, that's going to be part of the community center. And then also the single middle school gymnasium, the 42 by 74 foot court, that was also going to be part of the community center. So help me here with,
Well, the community center is an idea and concept at this point for the city. We are working on our own needs assessment and feasibility studies for that.
in terms of, so we've kind of brought some city interest into the, which is okay, I'm not going to oppose that idea, but you brought some city interest into the presentation, because I think we need to be pretty clear to the voters out there in terms of what's going to be included in this project, which
And
really
that-
is the option A.
And that's the intent of today, is to discuss the
make
features
sure that
wanted in
these
there and
gentlemen understand.
reconfirm the option A if that's what the PFD board wants.
Okay, so just
This
to make sure,
point.
so these gentlemen need us to get that specific guidance, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, what you're doing is what we're looking for. Where do we need to go with this? What changes from 216? Certainly, we're aware that the community center project is out there as well. How does this interface with that? So I think exactly what you're telling us is what we're looking for in terms of changes potentially to this plan. The other thing I might add is if we take out the gym space, we would need to take out the walk jog track as well. Those kind of go hand in hand.
Right, and that's fine. And in fact, at my age, it's better probably to have it down at the ground level. So yes, that would need to go also, right? I mean, because it's not part of option A. Everybody, help me out here.
I think what we're trying to do is define what option A is at this point, and so.
Let's go back to option A, and we kind of, because we were focusing kind of where we were on option
So excuse
D,
me,
we'll talk
Ken?
about a little bit about what's
Excuse me.
in option A.
So excuse me, Ken, so option A is what we had voted on and decided on, and I can't remember how many board meetings ago this was. It wasn't too long ago,
Not too long ago, I can't recall the.
but we did decide
Exact
on
date.
option A. So then, so Marie, this option A is this column, as opposed to the community center is over here?
I understand that, but what I'm saying is I don't know that we have decided what features should be included in the aquatics only option.
Yes, and so, and I think that's a very good point, and that's before where we had asked for a ranking now of, are you talking about the amenities? Okay, so then the amenities part of the study was going to include some sort of a presentation with regards to what are the highest revenue or cost recovery amenities, and what we're going to, so there'd be a ranking of the highest cost recovery amenities and then a ranking of the lowest. As Mr. Ballard had mentioned here, that one of the goals of this group was to try to have this overall project to be as, and as I've learned, it's not 100% cost recovery type of a situation. So the goal is to try to, from this report, that we can use that as an operational guide. And so when we think in terms of what will go into the aquatic center, that having some sort of an input as to what are the highest cost recovery amenities is going to be important in terms of who's going to subsidize that difference between the revenue and the expenses. so trying to minimize that difference as much as possible was part of our goals anyway back in 2016.
Just for sake of review, let's just talk about what's in this option A, so we're all kind of clear on that. Keith went through it pretty quickly, but it has the required support spaces, the locker rooms, the administrative area, all of that stuff we have to have just to operate a facility. Concessions area, that's really primarily focused on the outdoor aquatics piece, which we'll talk about. It has a 4,000 square foot indoor leisure pool. We had kind of a diagram of that, which we can go back to. That's certainly open to some discussion of how that might lay out. We have a wet classroom / party room. Talked about that. That goes kind of hand in hand with that leisure pool. And then a significant outdoor aquatics area, and that was kind of identified earlier. So those are the primary components, and it kind of represents what was taken out that you just mentioned in terms of the spaces that were removed from that. So that's kind of what option A is right now. We also had the capability at that point, from at least from where we were on the initial option A, which may be kind of what you're getting at, is that we also had the capability then of adding, at this point when we were discussing it, a later phase, it would be an 8-lane, 25-yard pool. So that's what A represents right now. Now, that's certainly open for any kind of discussion in terms of what it might be. Now, our plan is to come back to you once we've kind of gathered this information from you all, as well as from the community tonight. We'll come back to you probably after the first of the year with saying, okay, here's some options, and we've updated some of the information. And so we'll be able to kind of give you some options like we did the last time to work on. So this kind of is just informing us of where we need to go with this.
Sure, and I'm not sure exactly where we are on the dollar amount of sales tax revenue that we're able to generate, but
That was my question.
Okay, so Spence, you're gonna step in here in just a minute, but I think that 32 million bucks pushed it out of our budget. Go ahead, Spence.
Well, one of the things we ultimately, if we decide to put this on the ballot, one of the things we're going to have to decide is whether or not we go for a 1/10 or a 0.2% for sales tax. What is the bonding capacity at each of those levels? Approximately.
Staff is determining the current bonding capacity based upon sales tax revenues that we're seeing right now. I don't have those numbers in front of me. We're working through that with bond attorneys and our financial advisors.
Is there kind of a guesstimate? Is 30 million out of our 0.2%?
I would
budget?
not be able to give you an estimate at this time or a healthy guess.
My memory is that the 32 million pushes it out of the budget.
Right.
That's what my memory. So that's why I want to be careful here with, we want this to be a working document.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this is going to be a working document that is going to be available for the public and is going to be available for the voters to read, that we want to have clarity.
Sure.
And precision. And so if we go back again to your slide where you had the line drawn through the 3,600 or whatever it was, yeah, that one. I would want us to be careful with this slide to make sure, again, in terms of clarity, that this one says the total project costs 32 million bucks, and if we, really narrow it down to this option A and get a new number of what might be looking at the construction costs, that's for myself. And please speak up here. But when we send you back to do the work, that would be the thing that we'd want to be careful with.
We would come back to you if you said you wanted option A that we've kind of talked about today. We would come back to you with what the cost estimate would be, both from a capital perspective to build that and also the operational obligation to take that on. That's our plan. That's the reason for doing this. The other part of it is we're with you in terms of we want to make sure that this is doable within the dollars that can be bonded, as well as the operational implications that come forward with it. So we will, between now and then be overlaying what's possible out of whether it's, and that's a decision obviously for you all as the board and the city, is whether you're going to go a 0.1 or a 0.2. But we want to make sure we're bringing back options that are doable in terms of with the ability to finance through the PFD funding. So we'll work on that so we understand where that has to be. That provides us some brackets, both capital and operational, to meet. So we won't be bringing back an option for you that doesn't fit within the ability to fund.
Yeah, because what I'm a little bit concerned about also is, I can't remember what the saying is, a picture is worth how many words. If there are pictures in the packet that aren't going to be in the project, that's a confusion that I would sure hope we can avoid.
Well, as we get, if we get this down to where we're talking, we will extract out any of the options that are not out there and readily available. We won't be showing those. I mean, even within this, we had some, options that did represent, from a aquatics perspective. I mean, that was kind
Can
of
you stop right there also, just a minute? Go ahead now. I want to talk about that one. So
Yeah, and this was representative at that point in 2016 of kind of what the view was. And Water Technology will be here the next time, and they're the ones who generate the concept plans and also working with Barker Rinker CCAT generate the cost estimate. But the intent is that what we're showing diagrammatically is within the price range that we're showing. Now,
of the 32 or the 20?
well, at this point it was the 32, but that was because we were looking at not only an aquatic facility, but all those other components that we've now taken out.
So when you label this option D and it's called aquatics, how close is that to option A? What on that diagram would be X'd
My
out?
understanding is the aquatics piece of this did not change. So you'd have to drop off, option A does not have the 8-lane pool at the top up there. But the indoor piece that you see down there to the right, the outdoor piece to the left, that's option A. We didn't change the pool components. It's only whether certain pieces were in or out. But the concept in terms of size and magnitude for the aquatic options were the same for all of the options.
So did I hear you correct then, that option D, you would X out the 8-lane?
No,
the rest
well,
would stay?
option D did not include, none of the options in the first phase included the 8-lane pool. That was always a second phase,
Okay.
even in 2016. So that was showing you just more representative of what that looked like. But that is not one part of the first phase. But what you see up there for 2016 in terms of the outdoor and the indoor leisure/program pool does represent at that time what was buildable for the dollars that were allocated within those different options. And again, the pool options stayed the same. Now, all of that's up for discussion in terms of what it is. Or, again, if you strip out those other options on there, can that indoor pool be larger than what it is? Those are all options we can explore as we go forward with this. You've given us some pretty direct, direction in terms of what you're looking for in a revised phase or a revised approach to what we did in 2016. So that gives us some pretty definitive things to look for.
It may be more, a different way to look at this is that we can sit here and pick out amenities to add or subtract from this diagram. We have no idea what our bonding capacity is.
Exactly.
Until we know that, I think that what we need to charge you with doing is working with the city.
Absolutely.
Come up with our bonding capacity and then bring us a diagram that fits it.
Yep.
With
That's
some
our intent.
operating costs.
Exactly. And we asked early on, like you did, we asked the same question you did. What is the bonding capacity? What can be generated? Because we want to work backwards from what's affordable out of this. And we will in the next phase. And I can tell you, we will come back to you with concepts that we know aren't going to be buildable. We'll tell you if they are, that they're going to have to go to a later phase. But you're right. We need to know what that bonding capacity is to understand what that is. So that is our task at hand.
And our decision, at that point, we're going to probably have two scenarios. One at 1/10, one at 2/10. And our decision is going to be, how much do we want to go to the voters for?
Yep, I agree. And we fully back you on that. We need to know what the financial brackets we have to work within, and we're prepared to do that.
So with regards, going back to option A then, with regards to, there would be two budgets, kind of to follow up on what Spence is saying, there would be two budgets. There would be the option A capital cost budget, and then also there would be the operating cost
Yeah.
budget. So there'd be two of them.
Yep. Yeah. No, there would be two pieces to anything that we give you, and those are going to be the capital and the operations. So you have both sides of the equation on that.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
My concern is that, first of all, Spence, I will tell you that I believe we're at 0.2%. I wouldn't even worry about 1/10. This is just me speaking. I wouldn't even worry about 1/10%. You're not going to get, you're going to try to build a half a baby. You can't do it. And if we don't design something that is attractive to the general public as we see them, it isn't going to work. And I don't think we need to be chopping legs out from underneath this thing until we understand where we're at on dollars. That's the most important thing that we need right now, is the dollar amount that's available.
I agree.
And then see if you can plug that dollar amount anywhere else. But if we build something that is dependent on, well, in the future, ain't gonna happen. How many times have you seen a facility added on to in 10 years? Probably never. You get one shot at this thing to make it, and if you're building something that is not going to attract people, it will automatically fail. And the hard and facts of it is maybe we have to spend some dollars to do it, but if we can't get there, I'm not in agreement on the small gym. I think it ought to be there. And it's not going to get built in 2030. I can guarantee you that. So I'm concerned that we start chopping things out of this thing that is there. Now we are restricted by dollars, but we also can't hamstring the ability of this facility to make the best return that we can on it. And that's where you folks come in, is saying, you're all out of whack. It's not going to happen. We've already added $7, $8, or $10 million since 2016 and haven't changed anything. If we go to 2030, imagine what it's going to be. You guys need to tell us when we get this thing figured out, this is pie in the sky, doesn't make any difference. If you don't do this and this project's going to be a failure. And we do not need a failure. We need something that attracts the general populace to this facility so it can come as close as it can, which it never will, cover the expenses.
Couple things. First of all, Mr. Maloney, I can hear your thinking over here. So in our meeting minutes back in September, you mentioned about either go big or go home. So we haven't forgot that. And then the second item I just wanted to mention is that with regards to the middle school gymnasium, and it's good that we vet this. I'm glad we're having this conversation here. And Caroline and Marie, you guys need to step in here and agree or disagree or have it explained again and again. Because this was back in 2016 is what I'm reading off of.
Yes.
And so the single middle school gymnasium cost back in 2016 was $2 million. $2,042,185. And so this was back in 16. The Aquatics Center was $20 million.
Right.
So this middle school gymnasium is going to, it's going to add, it's not exactly 10% to the cost, but it's going to push that cost up higher. And that's what concerns me about if we move out of what we decided previously was the Aquatic Center, which was this option A, and then we start moving over into the community center, which we had kind of all agreed was going to be the city's project, then I'm not exactly sure what that means for our costs, and I'm not exactly sure what that means with the city's perhaps future plans. So, Mr. Zabel. if you could please kind of help us a little bit, again, with this conversation about the community center and perhaps what might be the city's vision, so that the Public Facilities District is either okay to step where we are talking about stepping, or perhaps we should not step over there.
Yeah, the money that you can use, so your 0.2% can build you an aquatics facility. It's not going to build a community center. That is a city project. And we had a pretty good discussion about that. We had a good discussion about that with a consultant just a couple of weeks ago. So building a gym as part of this is not going, it's not possible. I don't know how we do that for you. Now, the city council could later co-locate some things, but that's a decision of theirs to make. It's got nothing to do with the bond issue or the issue we're taking to the people.
Good, thank you. We need, you know, for me, I need that specific kind of clarity, so thank you. And as,
What is a community center?
you're not on there, are you on, Marie?
What's the definition of a community center?
Well, it's yet to be designed, but or even the location yet to be determined. But it would be, and it would be able to provide facilities for members of the public of any age. You know, before we had the senior center, but it would provide space. It may provide some recreational amenities. I mean, those are things that are yet to be determined and evaluated. It's not been to the Parks and Rec Board, to my knowledge. Yeah, so there has not been a lot of programming as to what that's been out there. We've not had a real conversation with the community about it at this point either.
So then it's still open.
That, yeah,
community
what
center
a
could
community
be-
center might be in that part of town, in say in middle part or west part of town is open. That's still, there's still a lot to talk about.
But to me, that doesn't tell me what cannot be included in the aquatic center. A meeting room could still be included.
Oh,
in
meeting
the
room,
aquatic
definitely.
center.
Yeah,
A
I think you
walking
would
track
want,
could
I think
still
you
be
would want
included.
some meeting rooms, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, just for operating the facility itself. I mean, you're gonna need to have breakaway spaces for people to have parties or, you know, instruction or whatever the case might be.
Okay. The walking track could still be included.
Well, that's not really an aquatic, part of an aquatics facility. That's something the city, yes.
Can you put the mic up to your?
Oh, yeah, I don't believe a walking track is something you would build with aquatics facility money. That is something the city, an amenity the city council at some point later, or prior to the project going to construction, could add, but that's not something that would go to a vote of the people as part of your project. That had to do with the 1/10 or 0.2%. And I do agree with Board Member Dietrich's comment about probably not a lot of value in talking about 0.1%, because you just can't build the scale of facility I think we're trying to accomplish here.
If I can jump back into this conversation a little bit, and not to try to, Mr. Zabel, put you on the spot here. However, you know, in working through my memory of some previous board conversations and discussions, there was, because Pasco does not have a senior center right now. Is that correct?
Actually, we do have the First Street Center that senior programming occurs out of that. I think Director Ratkai could talk into more detail if you're curious about it. But
No, that's okay. Just that's just enough. And then with regards to perhaps this community center helping to replace the one that was closed not too far northwest of here. And then I do recall a conversation that we had one time with a city employee with regards to the community center, and how do you make this attractive to such a cross section of people, whether it's senior citizens who might be using the senior center, but do you want to call a community center a senior center? Because how are you going to attract that teenager to a senior center? So I mean, there's kind of some play within this community center that I think my memory again, it has quite a wide reach to it of what it was going to include. So I just try to pass that along, that's my memory. Leonard?
Yeah, if I might ask, Mr. Zabel or Zach, it's my my remembrance that community center is off the table as far as this group is concerned. Because
I would concur with that, the 0.2% for a regional facility is not intended for a recreational or community facility. It's intended for this aquatic center.
yeah, and that's what I don't want to lose a bunch of time on, is discussing something that isn't a part of us. Now, we'll wind up with a picture, I'm being very simple on it, a picture of a piece of ground, and the city council may say, well, I just put this over here, but that's their issue, not our issue. And so we don't necessarily get concerned about whether or not it's going to attract people to come over to the aquatic side, because it cannot be financed with what we're talking about legally.
Yeah, that said, though, the question of a walking path came up. I think you could get creative on how you laid it out. You are going to undoubtedly have a pedestrian facility that goes around the facility, and probably some open space. So if you actually thought about how you laid those sidewalks out instead of just sticking them up against the side of the building,
yeah,
you probably could accomplish something that looks a little bit like gives a person a place to walk, from an exercise standpoint, as well as serve the parking lot next to it.
Yeah, I think we can do that, and that's
Right.
pretty simple. But to be carrying a lot of effort into a senior center or a community center or something like that is off the table, I think.
Yeah, meeting space. There's some. I think there's sense for some meeting space. I mean, it's there's no cut and dried
I think meeting
bright
space,
line, but meeting space definitely there's room for that. Gymnasium, no, that's kind of out of bounds.
the gymnasium is out of bounds.
Absolutely.
Well,
Okay.
that's appropriate language.
Okay.
Out of bounds.
Okay. Okay, that clarifies. Thank you.
All right, so then back to the matter at hand here, as far as you gentlemen and what you're gonna go back with working for us. Again, I think the focus narrows down to this option A. Is that,
Yep.
everybody agree on that?
Option
The option A?
A.
Marie, you good? Leonard? Spence?
Yes.
Yep.
In our option A, we don't have any meeting space.
True.
You do have a small party and space in there. Now, we can size that a little. There's some options of what we can do to that. But you have a small one in there. But we can look at that, make that larger. It's not overly huge.
Where are you at there, Ken?
Well, if you go back down there, we have like what we call a wet classroom party room. And that's an area of about 1,700 square feet, so it's not that small. So that's, you already have you have something. I'm trying to give a comparison of what that might be. Probably half of this room. So you do have some meeting space that also work for the party rooms and others. So you have something in there already with that.
So I guess what I'm thinking is, if we look at 0.2% as far as our bonding capacity goes, what that number is, we want to build as good a, as involved an aquatic center.
Sure.
With the appropriate meeting rooms, and get by with that amount of money.
Right.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I take it as our marching orders are to take option A, match that with the funding that's possible out of 0.2%, and see where that puts us, and come back to you with some options of what that may be.
Coming back to this meeting room then, if the wet classroom back in 2016, $645,000. So if we talk about this meeting room, if we stay within this overall budget, let's just say 20 million bucks, just for the sake of discussion. Then if this wet classroom cost is going to go up, does that mean outdoor aquatics or the 4,000 square foot indoor leisure program pool, that's something that's gonna come down on that?
Well, in theory, I mean, we know our costs are higher, but let us work with that, and we can come back with you with some recommendations. We're going to give you something that works, and we're not going to cut things that are, that aren't going to give you a facility that isn't functional. So in other words, if we sat there and said, we can't take out the party rooms in the meeting room, we have a facility that doesn't function very well, just in terms of meeting the needs from an aquatic standpoint. So we'll marry that stuff all up. I mean, we don't know yet what the limits are on that 0.2 that's going to tell us what the brackets are that we have to work within. Once we kind of get that figured out, we'll develop an option or two that says where that's going to take. We'll come back to you like we did the last time, kind of say, okay, here's what we have. You can react to that, and then we'll take that from our next meeting and then develop the final report out of there. So even next time, it'll be a reporting in for you guys to weigh in, and there will still be potentially one last round of revision. So we're just at the very front end of this stuff. You've given us a very clear between what the board said, what we've heard from the city, pretty clear direction of what we need to come back with. Now we just need to match that up. And we do have the issues of cost as it relates to site and other things that are going to impact the budget as well, which we also need to be working with a resolution to that piece as well.
So what's motivating me with that comment is knowing that what the community center is going to include and accomplish, then I wouldn't want us to reduce what we're trying to accomplish with the aquatic center. So,
Absolutely.
I want to maximize the attractiveness of the aquatic center.
Absolutely, and that's certainly going to be our approach. We're going to that's the focus is maximizing that.
Okay, where does that leave us?
Well, tonight, from 6 to 8 o'clock, the public will be putting some input into this over the next period of time.
Right.
And that will be giving some more direction. And there's no doubt in my mind you're going to have there's going to be somebody put out a 50-meter pool. I can guarantee it. I can see it coming. But that's what we have to weed through.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we've got public input that will be coming tonight for sure, and then over the next period of time. And we'll have to digest that.
Yep.
And see how it all fits in.
Yes, and that's absolutely true. I mean, that's where we're going to open it up for the community. We will tell them, we'll be showing them very similar to this, but we're going to tell them that due to some requirements from the PFD, even from the city, that the focus is going to be on aquatics, while these other amenities may be important, and we may even use it as a precursor to getting some direction on what we call the dry side amenities, that it would be part of the community center. But we're going to focus in, even based on our conversation here this afternoon, that our real focus is going to be on the aquatics piece, because that's what this project is going to be about based on what we heard today.
Yes.
Okay?
That's kind of, go ahead, Spence.
Can I ask one other question? Option A, as far as how big a site do you need for that particular option, acreage wise?
Let me squint. I'd say 4 acres at a minimum.
Thank you.
And that's for building and parking.
That's for building and parking, the outdoor piece.
Okay.
A little more would be better.
Which then leads into the conversation about site location.
Right.
And how is that going to come together? And maybe, Zach, this is something that you want to contribute to, or, okay, Ken's got let him do it first. Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Well, we've started the process working with Zach and the city on trying to identify possible locations for the aquatic center. Much as it was even in 2016, some of the sites that we're looking at are in private ownership. As such, we've got to be very careful how we use that information, but we're looking at a number of site options that are possible, that we're going to have to meet the requirements in terms of the acreage that's needed to support obviously the building and the parking, but also issues such as access and other things. And certainly if it's in private ownership, how do we deal with the questions of site acquisition in terms of the cost side of that, and does that need to be a line item in this budget? So the sites is an issue. At this point, because of the nature of the fact that we're looking at a variety of sites, it's hard for us, and we don't want to at this point bring forward any real notion of where those sites are. The basic thing is we don't talk about site unless they're in public ownership at this particular point. It's not good part of planning at this point. But that issue is going to have to be moved forward as we work on this process as well.
Yes, because at our last board meeting, maybe these need to be on bigger pieces of paper, Zach. The last board meeting, Zach did mention about the importance of determining a site before this issue is placed on the ballot. So,
Well, I think you're going to have to. I
Yes.
don't think it's going to go anywhere if you don't.
So along with that then, is there any thoughts from any board members with regards to, is there like 4 or 5 sites? How are we gonna work through a ranking process? Tell me what board members are thinking there.
Yeah, my thinking on it is that Ballard King, or whoever their partners are on this thing, have the ability to see whether or not it will fit.
Oh,
I don't know that the area, the location will fit, and because of the demographics that we're working with, I don't know that I have the ability, or we have the ability to make that total decision.
right.
I would suggest that it comes back to us with A, B, C, D, however that number is, or A through Z. And then we look at that. Someone's going to need to make that determination. And that's left for the professionals, in my estimation. I would hate to debate that across us 5 members.
We have
With
a number of site criteria that we look at for a facility of this nature, and we're used to doing that analysis. And really, it's Keith and BRS that kind of head up that aspect of this. But we will look at that, and we have definite criteria that we're again looking at, and size is only one of them in terms of being able to support obviously the building. That's the first and the easiest one, but there's other factors as well. And we will have a site analysis as best we can based on the facilities that we have. Again, the real issue is the fact that at this point, we're looking at a number of sites that aren't in public ownership, which just kind of complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, success is always location, location, location.
Exactly, and the other part of it, which Keith would certainly concur with, is it drives that bottom line cost estimate in terms of what it's going to take to actually build the facility, and if we have to acquire a site, how's that going to be dealt with as well? So it does, besides just where it's going to be, it has a big impact on cost.
So I don't remember which one of you gentlemen mentioned it, that the potential number of amenities that can go into an aquatic center. Was it a couple hundred or something like that?
It's pretty endless anymore. I mean, literally, it's almost like, and again, when we come back the next time, we'll have water technology who can show you some of those things and give you some diagrams. But it's almost like sitting down with you, and it is. You can sit down with a catalog and say, here's different options for slides. There's different options for interactive water features. I mean, and the size of them, the cost of them all vary, and you can just look with that. So yeah, I mean, and it's only going up in terms of the types of things that can be included in this pool. We're going to match that with the budget. We're going to match that with what we know is kind of tried and true. And again, we'll leave that to Water Tech to kind of come back with some options that kind of identify what that might be that fits within the fee range for the facility. But yeah, there are just almost an endless amount of options that are out there. We'll get that culled down to things that we think are workable for this situation.
So going back to Marie's comment or question that she had, And thinking about the 2016 report that you folks had put together for us, there was a ranking of, the highest revenue generating, the lowest revenue generating. And I don't remember exactly the number, if it was like 10 items or something.
Yeah,
I remember it being
right
more
here.
than 5, but.
Yeah, we just took the top 5 just for simplicity's sake.
Okay. And of course, the top 5 there, only number 4 is going to be in the Aquatic Center.
Right. 3. Well, 3, the party room will be part of it, the outdoor
That would
leisure
be
pool.
but it's, okay. So then, following up on Marie's question that she had, that perhaps, she was like, well, how are we going to narrow this down to what are going to be the amenities? So there would, perhaps if you could provide, as part of your report, then those, maybe, I don't know what they are, the top, when we looked at that diagram, I don't know exactly how many amenities are in that diagram, but when we think in terms of whether it's the top 5 or the top 8, the revenue generating, and what are the top 5, the top 8, or the top 10 lowest revenue generating, but perhaps if there could just be a list, it doesn't have to be ranked in any way, shape, or form, but just some sort of an inventory of what perhaps could be out there, that maybe when we really get into the serious part of deciding what's in this,
right,
that maybe some sort of help with what is the population out there of all these amenities might be helpful just to see as a list.
Yeah, what you see here was a broader based listing that dealt with not only the aquatic side but the recreational. What we'll do is I'll come back to you and we'll have water technology put it together of kind of what the top 5 and or so amenities are in terms of kind of revenue generation, and that's really directed at what's going to draw people to the facility. So we can have, in pretty general terms, give you a listing that's really, focuses on aquatics and doesn't have all these other spaces in here.
If you were to go back to the slide with option D, how many amenities are in that slide, are included on that slide? Keep going. It would be that one right there.
Well, I mean, we have.
Are there 5, or how many would you consider on that slide?
Well, there was on the list in there, basically, we had the outdoor leisure amenity that was there. So that, with what we were working with in 2016, that represented from the aquatic standpoint in a first phase, the things that were going to be the top revenue producers. We had the party room, we had the recreational water, we have the outdoor pool. So you had those amenities in there. But that was looking pretty big picture, and that was balancing that with also non-aquatic amenities. We had the recreation pieces in it. But what we're going to do is come back and we'll focus a little more. If you look down here, and I think Keith kind of touched on it earlier, if we look, this is going to be dangerous. If we look down here at we have what's a lazy river down here. We have slides that are coming off here. We have a wave pool. So we'll kind of rank those kinds of amenities in there. And here we have just smaller versions of some of the same stuff. In here we have an interactive play feature. So what we'll do is we'll take the features that you see and some other ones and rank those in terms of what's kind of drives the utilization of facilities. And again, focus on that. But this was designed to kind of provide a facility that would have a strong interest and drive usage of the facility, which then translates into revenue for the facility. So even at the time in 2016, the aquatic pieces were looking at what was really going to be supportable in this marketplace from a use standpoint. But we're going to focus, because we're going to become now aquatic-centric on this project, we'll focus our efforts really solely on the aquatic area.
And I realize and I recognize this is a leap when I ask this question. If the voters go through the manual, the study, and they see this diagram here, that what concerns me is that what this represents, is it what they're going to be voting on?
Well, that's always a concern. And I think, one of the things that's out here is we don't want to be showing more than what you can build at the time. Now, part of this is, quite honestly, how long this process takes. And we unfortunately had to deal with things where we show, based on the information that we have, that if it passes and it gets built at this time, it's doable. If that project is delayed a couple years, we probably can't do what's shown in there just with if inflation continues like it is on the building cost side. So it's always an issue, but we're trying to show things that are doable, at least in theory, from the size of it. I mean, even in the outdoor aspect of this particular image here, there's a number of different ways that you can work with what's there that gives you opportunities to either expand that or reduce it from a cost standpoint without appreciably changing what's in the diagram. And it's always tough where we sit here in 2019, 2020, trying to make sure that we're showing things that have the ability to be delivered based on a yet to be determined delivery date or a construction date for that, and not having any control over cost implications of this and things that are out of our control, everything from tariffs and everything else that drive up costs. So we'll do the best we can. We're always sensitive about not showing things that aren't doable. I can't guarantee you, based on the timing, that what we absolutely show you in every way, shape, or form can potentially be built, but the concept of what we're showing certainly could.
Mark,
Yes,
one
sir.
question towards them. I know things change in everybody's world.
Right.
And what, y'all go to conventions and conferences all the time. And what is the next thing that is out there that looks like it's going to be popular
Right.
and cost effective, instead of putting something in that someone says, yeah, that was good 10 years ago, that kind of a thing.
Well, again, I think it'll be important, and next time when we have water tech here, they can talk better to that. But we're always trying to do things that are not too far. We're always talking about what's a trend and what's a fad, and the difference is if you get onto a fad, it may by the time 2 or 3 years that nobody does that anymore. So you got to be careful on that side. But we also don't have something that says, oh well, that's that looks like it's 10 years old in terms of the day it opens. So, the one thing is with this project team on the design side, on the aquatic side, we do this all the time and we do it all over the country. So we're real cognizant of putting something out that fits your market, that fits what's going on in terms of aquatics in this particular case, that's going to be something that's meets the needs and the expectations of the public, but it's not so far out there that the risk aspect of that in terms of its popularity over time is yet to be determined. So we'll be able to show you some things that we know will work and that also are cost effective and will draw people to this facility. I mean, there's one of the unique things in this outdoor aspect of it is the wave pool piece. It's still a popular item out there, but there's other options besides that.
At our last board meeting, there was passed out an operations analysis update from Ballard King. And one of the items that I just want to make sure is going to be included in the study, and if you could just elaborate a little bit on like how this gets done, that there's this review of public-private issues, possible impact of public aquatic center on the private sector, possible role of public-private partnership, advantages, disadvantages of private versus public construction development and operations. So just want to make sure that is going to be included in the study, and if you elaborate as much as you can, I think will be helpful.
Well, certainly we'll identify each of those issues and what we think, again, this facility might have in terms of impact on existing providers. Also, any types of public-private partnerships that may be out there that we can identify at the time that we're doing this study in terms of where that might be, the realm of how that might come together. And there's different, and we talk about partnerships, that's a really long continuum in terms of where those partnerships can fall along that. We'll look at that in terms of what that may mean for a facility. So each of those items that are in our scope, we will certainly be sure that we're dealing with in some way, shape, or form through the study as much as we can with the information that we have.
Because what seemed to bubble up a lot during our discussions in our previous board meetings, of course, now that the community center, we understand where that's going to be, and then there was a great deal of discussion with regards to the community center and how that affected the private sector. but we still have, you know, some consideration still in option A that I don't want us to lose sight of, that still needs to be answered and addressed.
Right.
Thank you.
Is the cost of the land included in the total project cost?
No, there's no cost for land put in there. We don't at this point know what that would be, or even potentially if it's necessary, depending upon the site aspect. But it is a wild card in this that at this point has not been allocated, and you know, depending upon what the options are, could be a sizable amount of money in theory. So that aspect is not shown in there, and unless we can get to the point of a preferred site and be able to determine what that is, that will remain that way.
Could you explain again what the difference between the construction cost is and the total project cost then, if the land is not in there?
You want to?
The construction cost is what you'd pay for the building. The total project cost includes what we call soft costs, site costs, and off-site costs. So off-site costs are costs outside the property line. One of the considerations is if we selected a site and a utility needed to be extended to that site outside the property line, that would be an off-site cost. Or if we had to fund a driveway or maybe a traffic signal. An on-site cost would be extending the utilities within the property line to the building or the project site. Things like fire lanes, streets and drives within the property line. Other costs are going to include professional services, paying the consulting team, testing for materials during construction, contingencies, both a contingency for the community, the PFD, as well as within the design and construction contingency, and what we call furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment, what we talk about is if the building, you could lift it up like a model and turn it over, anything that falls out is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So that would be desks, chairs, computers, fitness equipment, kitchen equipment, things like that.
Is the land cost going to come from you folks, or is it going to come from city staff?
Land costs will be supplied by city staff.
Okay.
And we're going to probably have to make some assumptions based on the area we need and a generic cost per foot.
Okay.
Because it'll be out of the bond proceeds. There's no money just to buy land unless we find a piece of city-owned property that's suitable.
So if it's going to be part of the bond proceeds, then we're going to have to be very careful with knowing the amount that we can bond, and make sure that, you know, back again in 2016, this option A, that it was approximately $20 million, that we're going to want to make sure that we now know what that land cost is so that we don't overshoot this budget.
We'll need a placeholder number.
Okay.
And we
yes.
probably also need your $20 million number updated.
Okay. I don't know, is there anything else? Leonard, Caroline, Marie, Spence, anything? No, go ahead, she's got something, go ahead, Marie.
Well, I guess I want to clarify, is the intent of the meeting tonight with the public to get their comments and ideas of, I want 3 water slides, not 2, I want...
Probably not to that level. It's probably, you know, what types of aquatic side of it's probably in some way, shape, or form, you know, how important is outdoor aquatics? How important is having indoor? Is it recreational? Is it being able to support swimming lessons? Is it competitive? What are the important pieces that you think, as from an aquatic standpoint, that people, and we won't get to the point of should be 2 slides, 3 slides. We're not anywhere close to that yet. It's big picture terms. What types of aquatic opportunities that you want to have? What do you want to be able to do in these? In this facility, and so is it indoor, is it outdoor, is it competitive based, is it program based, is it recreational swimming, is it some combination of those? That's what we're going to be looking for the meeting tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so then, does that finish up our conversation with Mr. Hayes and Mr. Ballard. Is there any last questions, comments? Okay, and then, so thank you very much, gentlemen. So then, if Zach, I'd kind of like to turn this back over to you just a minute. If you could remind everybody of the meeting time tonight and where it's at.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the meeting this evening for a community open house for the Aquatics Center is at 6 o'clock in the Police Department's Community Services Room, which is at 215 West Sylvester, just east of the City Hall on the same campus.
And then number two, the going back and watching a replay of this, it'll be at the City of Pasco's website.
Yes, it'll be available on the City of Pasco website.
About how long does that take from now, would you guess? It's not tomorrow, is it?
Never had that question. I think it's fairly instant. It'll be available as early as tomorrow, if not later this evening.
Quick.
So.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there, so if there's no other questions, the gentlemen have sat down, which takes us then to, I've already lost your agenda. I keep losing things and this is all I have. So item number 9 then is other business. Is there any other business which we have to talk about our next meeting, day and time?
Yeah, from a staff perspective, Mr. Chairman, the next meeting is scheduled for November 19th. That is a Tuesday. Going back to our normal time, which is 4 o'clock. If that's acceptable to the PFD board, then we will continue with that schedule.
You said November the 19th at 4?
Tuesday, November 19th, 4 o'clock in this room.
And you said it's going to be in the council chambers?
Yes.
Okay. Right here.
4 o'clock.
Yep. Okay. Zach, is there anything else that you need to make us aware of?
Nothing from staff's perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. So having said that, then hopefully everybody will be able to make it on November the 19th, our next board meeting. And if you get a chance to go to the open house from 6 to 8 tonight, that would be great also. I don't know how many of us will be there. I'm going to be there, and
I can't.
Leonard can't. You're going to go
6 to 8 tonight?
6 to 8 o'clock tonight, and it's in the community room or whatever's at the police station?
Yes, in the Pasco Police Building.
Yes, 6 to 8 tonight. I'll be there, so anybody else? You're gonna be there? Spence, you be there, Marie? Good. Okay, so it is 4:20, and I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, and see everybody soon.